The Chargers tight end room is one that a lot of people are sleeping on right now, but actually if you look into it, they have a pretty good amount of depth there, a good solid 4 or 5 guys. Now don't get me wrong, none of those guys are at the level of like Travis Kelce or George Kittle, but this is going to be a battle at training camp and a really important one to watch, not only because of how often tight ends are used in this Greg Roman offense, but also because anybody in that room right now can really just break out in training camp and make a name for themselves. So let me give you the full breakdown on this tight end room. Now, tight end was a position that I was like really worried about heading into free agency because of how many tight ends Greg Roman uses in his offense, but also the lack of depth that we had at that position. We just lost Gerald Everett, who was clearly our best tight end last year. I mean, arguably like our only good tight end. And think back to a time when Gerald Everett was leaving in free agency and the only tight ends that we had signed were Donald Parham and Stone Smartt. And neither of those guys really instilled confidence in me, especially after that Packers game last year where they both had some drops. But I mean, like, everyone was dropping balls that day. The team had 6 drops collectively. Donald Parham, though, he had 2 drops against New England. And then Stone Smartt, he only had 19 targets last year with only that 1 drop in the Packers game. But my point is, neither of these guys should be the main tight ends in the offense or like the starting tight ends with Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, because you want blockers at that position unless you can catch the ball really well. And I don't think either of these guys provide enough in the passing game in order to warrant them being on the field so often in spite of their blocking ability. Stone Smartt was the 3rd worst run blocker in the NFL for all of tight ends last year, and Donald Parham was the 17th worst. So when I say they struggled in the run game and blocking, like, I really mean it. And if they want to see some playing time in this offense, they're going to have to become better blockers. And I think you can teach a lot of that with technique, specifically Donald Parham. I think he's got a high ceiling as a blocker because of his size. He's 6'9", 240 pounds, and that's going to help him see the field in this offense, because as long as he gives effort and just like learns the proper technique, he'll be able to block most of the time. It really is just kind of like a mindset and an effort thing, because he's got the size that teams love. But also on top of that, he was a better blocker than Stone Smartt was last year, so he's got a leg up on him there. And being 6'9" is a major advantage in the receiving game as well, because we've seen throughout Donald Parham's career, like typically when he scores, it's when Justin Herbert is just throwing the ball up to him in the red zone, way up high to the point where only he can contend for the ball because he's freaking 6'9" with a huge reach. So you just let Justin Herbert lob the ball up to him extremely high. I would expect Donald Parham to make this roster, and I do think that he has a role on this team, but he's going to need to work on that blocking ability. Once we get into training camp and the pads get on, keep an eye on him, but also he needs to get healthy because he was out for some extended period of time working with the trainers during OTAs and Minicamp, so he's going to have some time to get healthy before training camp. He needs to stay healthy, needs to work on his blocking. Now, Stone Smart's pathway to playing time is a little tougher because he lacks the size that Donald Parham has, and he also has less production, and he was a worse run blocker by a significant margin. No one expected him to make this roster last year, though, and it would not surprise me to see him prove people wrong again this year. He is a pretty good receiving tight end, but he is going to need to develop his blocking skills even more than Donald Parham, because he brings less to the passing game, in my opinion. But both of those guys had some really good moments last year, and I really wouldn't count either of them out. But Will Dissly is a tight end that signed in free agency that does not need to be coached up in the run game, because he was the 3rd highest graded run blocker by PFF last year and the highest graded pass blocking tight end. He doesn't bring much to the passing game, though, as a receiver, or does he? Because if you look into it, yes, he only had 17 catches last year, okay, but he had an 89.5 completion percentage when he was targeted, okay? So he's going to catch the ball at a high rate. But after the catch, he had 7 missed tackles forced and 8 first downs. So that means almost half the time that he caught the ball last year, it would not only go for a first down, but he would make somebody miss. He also had more yards per route run than both Donald Parham and Stone Smartt, while also having more yak in total. Will Dissly had 128 yak on 17 catches. Donald Parham had 124 yards after the catch on 27 catches. Stone Smartt only had 55 on 11 catches. Will Dissly elevates this tight end room not only because of his elite blocking ability, but his receiving ability as well. He just wasn't used in Seattle as a pass catcher, and I think that's probably because you have two other tight ends above him, Noah Fant and Colby Parkinson, who had 77 targets last year combined, who were both better receiving tight ends than him. So why would you have your best blocking tight end eating up the targets of your two receiving tight ends? I mean, I just think it was good coaching by Pete Carroll to put your tight ends in their specific positions where you want them to succeed, because that's what they do their best work in. And now I'm thinking about Brandon Staley being a bad coach. So let's just go back to the tight end room. I would say Will Dissly is a sleeper, but Chargers fans, we're not sleeping on this dude. I know that we all expect some good things from him, and I think that he is going to have a huge impact on this roster, not only in the run game, but also in the passing game too. I think he's going to catch a couple balls, but maybe not as big of an impact as Hayden Hurst is going to have on this passing game, because he really brings some high upside and athleticism to this tight end room when it comes to receiving ability. He's not going to make a ton of guys miss after the catch, and he is coming off a down year with the Panthers, but listen, that Panthers offense brought everybody down. Hayden Hurst, at his full potential, can be a legit receiving threat and one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL. If you go back and see what he did with the Ravens, the Falcons, and specifically the Bengals, you will see the potential.
You have 6 guys in the league that everybody wants, and there's no reason that Hayden can't be that next guy. He's got all the speed, all the hands, all the ability. Hayden just needs to find the right situation.
That is some high praise from the tight end coach, but it is deserved, because just a few weeks later, he was tearing up OTAs. Hayden Hurst has the most boom or bust potential in this tight end room. He's going to be 31 years old. He is coming off some scary injuries, but he flashed some really good play just as recently as 2 seasons ago. He also was the worst run blocking tight end last year in a very low sample size, but he was also in a terrible offense all around. Nobody played well in the Panthers offense. A better judgment of his run blocking ability, I think, is his time in Cincinnati, where he graded just kind of middle of the pack. Another tight end who has been really impressive in OTAs is the undrafted free agent Zach Heins. We talked about him just last week, but he is coming from a school that has developed some really good NFL tight ends recently, and he has the size at 6'7", 260 pounds. He's only 2 inches shorter than Donald Parham, but he has 20 more pounds on him. So you talk about the blocking potential because of his size. Zach Heins has more upside in the blocking area. He also was a solid blocker in college and flashed some really good blocks at times in the run game. Don't underestimate his hands though, because we have seen and heard about how he is impressing in OTAs as a receiver before he can even show his work in the run game as a blocker with the pads on. He is building momentum right now, and he could really force his way onto the field and earn some good playing time in his rookie season. Now, lastly is Luke Benson, the athletic tight end from Georgia Tech. In short, Luke Benson is pretty similar to Hayden Hurst in the passing game, but was used a lot in the backfield and in motion as a blocker. He was a pretty good blocker as well, and even was able to block Jeremiah Trotter from Clemson, who is now on the Eagles. He had some good tape in college, but we haven't really had any reports about how he is doing so far, how he's looking in camp. So we're just going to have to keep an eye out for him, because we don't know what's going on right now. But again, if you watch my undrafted free agent video, I really liked his tape, and he looked better than I thought he would in college. Now, that is the full breakdown of this tight end room. And if you want to hear more about the undrafted free agent Zach Heins, this is why he is so exciting.